Hi, everyone. So this is May 19th, for those who weren't sure about that. It's Tuesday, May 19th, and we are on our fourth week of community live stream, Come to Your Senses and Find the Story. It's great to be back and to be hopefully reaching some friends, people that I know, people that I don't know, to kind of take a little bit of time at the end of a day, the end of a Tuesday, and think about the way that coming to our senses and becoming more in touch with our senses can actually help us get some words onto the page. So I just want to recap just a little bit, just for those people who this may be their first time, or even if you've been joining us, just to sort of regroup and review a bit. So the first thing to know is that if you don't consider yourself a writer, or if you're just kind of hopping on to because you were curious or just wondering what this was about, you don't have to identify as a writer in any way. This is for writers of all levels. It's really just a chance to think about the way that our sensual lives and our sensory experiences can actually be really good fuel for getting some words onto a piece of paper. As I said last week, this doesn't have to be a full short story, or certainly the start of a book, or anything that you might consider or define as a larger project. This could really be as simple as just recognizing that there's value to um, just being more uh, sensory on the page, even in terms of an email or in terms of a letter or just a note that you write to someone. So it's an opportunity to become a little bit more vivid, a little bit more alive in your writing, whatever that means to you. It doesn't have to be because you're working on something that you hope to have published someday. If that's the case, that's great. And if that is the case and you're joining us, I'm happy to have you. But I just want to let people know that it's really just a chance to just have maybe a fresh way of thinking about the way our senses are available to us. And sometimes we don't even think about that. And especially, I think, in light of what we're experiencing now, it's kind of a luxury, a 30-minute luxury to think about um, how what we taste, what we touch, what we smell, what we hear, and what we see can make us see the world in sort of a more open way. And I guess to then take that to the next level and say, make us be able to recreate the world in one or all of those categories on the page. So again, that's a little bit of a review. Welcome again. I do want to say that because we're on Facebook, there is an opportunity if at any point you have a question, or if I sort of just push out some questions and you want to type in an answer, that's totally fine and great. And that will be on mine, it's the right side, but there's a comment section. So you can just type something in if you'd like, a question or a comment. I also do just want, last week, I think I ended on this note, but I do just want to begin on a note of gratitude. So again, thank you all for showing up. Thank you all for whatever hard work you did this week. I've come to realize that gratitude is even more, it's important every day, whether we're living in a pandemic or not. And it's something that I've worked on for a while, and consider it a really important exercise in my life. But I do just want to say thank you to those of you who've done whatever you define as your life's work and done it in a way that you're proud of this week. And also, if you or loved ones in your life are serving in the healthcare industry or on the front lines in some capacity, I just want to extend my thanks to you for that as well. Um, So my hope this week is that we will, I'll introduce you to a couple of books. One, actually, I did introduce you to it already, but we'll revisit it again. We'll loop back to it. And the books that I'm going to talk about are ones that I'm bringing up. The Joe Brainard book, where I think I had talked about it in the first week, the I Remember memoir. That's for the purpose of reminding you that there's a prompt in that. Actually, in every line of that book, there's a prompt available to you as well. And there are two other books that I'm going to mention, and all three of those books have within them, and hopefully within my discussion around them, prompts available to you. And again, for those who may be joining us, who haven't before, or who don't participate in a literary community in any way, or just the easiest way to say it is don't know what a prompt is, that's totally fine. Basically, a prompt is something that uh, I typically offer to my students in every single class. It could be just one word, it could be a sentence, it could be something like finish this sentence, and that's a prompt. Sometimes I'll offer a picture, sometimes I'll play a song. It really is just something that is an opportunity that from me to you, for you to respond to in writing. So with the books that I'm going to share today, they are inherently in those books, there are prompts, and I'll talk about that as well. So hopefully you'll get some prompts on the page and then be able to use them throughout the course of the week if you're in a regular writing practice. And so that's going to happen. I'm going to introduce you to some books, and reintroduce you to some books. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the concept of walking, and walking in particularly walking and using our senses, because I've been talking to a lot of people. I guess you could say I've been talking and walking a lot more, definitely walking a lot more since we've been um, on our pause and at home more. So I've been taking sometimes two walks a day. I've tried to enjoy one walk a day. For years I've done that, but now I feel like I've been making my walks a little bit longer and maybe even adding a shorter one later in the day. So I want to talk a little bit about the way that walking can, if we if we try and if we let it, walking can help us actually become a little more in touch with our senses. And what I have found, and actually I've listened to interviews and read some interviews with writers who have said that, there are thoughts that are generated in the walking and in the movement, and even in the rhythm of walking, that can really help them uh, develop ideas for new stories, or just a line or the start of something. So we'll talk a little bit about walking. And I think I'm going to, of course, like we've done in the last few weeks, we are going to do a little bit of show and tell. I have a couple of objects I want to share with you and give you the little history or story behind them, all related to sensual and sensory experiences. We might get to music and we might get to listening. We'll see. We'll see how the time goes. So again, if you have a question, type it in. But we're going to start with, I think I'm going to actually start with what I was going to end with in terms of the book. So I wanted to share with you this book. I picked it up a few weeks ago when it first came out, and I'm really finding it very useful and helpful in my writing classes. Also, I've been just sort of opening it up and looking at some of the prompts that are available. So this is the Poets and Writers Complete Guide to Being a Writer. The title is kind of, it's a very, I guess we'd say, like a very concrete and simple title, which is perfectly fine. I don't know if it looks if the title comes across as a little bit of a sort of a how-to or self-help type, in that kind of a tone, but I will tell you that I'm finding a lot of what's in here very helpful. So for what that's worth, I'll just offer that to you. And I did want to begin with this prompt. So there's a whole chapter on writing prompts. And I wanted to begin with this one because I think it's a kind of an interesting way to start. So this prompt is called On Beauty, and it goes like this. You can always tell prettiness from beauty. Beauty arises from contradiction, even when it's under the surface. Any report of experience will be contradictory, and part of the reportage is to include those contradictions, said Chris Kraus in a conversation with Leslie Jamison for Interview Magazine. And then the prompt, which is for you to write a personal essay, or for the reader of this to write a personal essay. So this is write a personal essay exploring the idea that an underlying contradiction is intrinsic to the value of beauty. What are some images, scenes, or emotions in your life or art that you've found to be beautiful? And what contradictions might lie within them? How can you effectively integrate contradictions into your own reporting to explore true beauty? So I wanted to bring that up. I actually had it, I had a bookmark in it, and I just wrote on the bookmark on beauty and that I love it, because I would like for us to think about the way that we use our senses to experience beauty. And again, I recognize that this might not be deliberate. I'm not saying that you wake up and say, okay, I am going to purposely go outside and search for a cardinal that is strikingly gorgeous and the color of the brightest red that I've ever seen, so that I can, in this moment, experience something that I define as beautiful. I'm not saying it happens like that. Maybe it does for some people. I know that when I make a deliberate decision to, let's say, go to see, I'm a big, some of you who've, maybe people who've been hopping on for this series every week probably realize this by now, but I'm a big fan of photography. I love old photographs. I love black and white photographs, ones that belong to me and ones that don't. But anyway, a lot of times if there's a photographer that I admire, or whose work I really admire, and maybe the work is going to be in an exhibit, that will be a deliberate decision on my part to go and experience what I already believe will be beauty in the way that I define it. But I'm not saying it always happens like that. But my point with this, or one of the ways that I thought that this prompt might be useful, is to say, think about, and you don't necessarily have to write a whole personal essay right now. Maybe just right now you jot down a few notes about how when you experience something through one of your five senses, something that you would define as embodying beauty or being beautiful, how and why and where does contradiction lie in that experience, or in that in that experience, in that taste, or in that what you see. So for example, I may, again, to use the photography example, if I'm at a show, let's say, and I see a picture of something or a photograph of something that is that is tragic in terms of the backdrop, or that basically, maybe that there's sadness, that I see that there's sadness in there, but it's also beautiful. That's kind of what I'm talking about, the contradiction. I'm going to a better example, better than mine, which I just gave, is actually in literature. I think that it's very clear that in a lot of great literature, there's conflict and contradiction, and that doesn't mean that there isn't beauty as well. So one of the examples that I wanted to share was this poem that, it's one of my favorite poems, and I use it a lot actually in the early part of the semester. I used it when I was teaching freshman comp in the early part of the semester, because there's something in here that I think is a great way to get students thinking about contradiction and also about beauty, and it's accessible as well. I think everybody in some way has something to say about what I've discovered in this poem as a potential writing prompt. But I'm just going to read the prompt to you again along the lines. And if you don't want to listen to me read it, you can be jotting down notes of your own having to do with beauty and contradiction and the senses. But I'm going to read this poem to you, and hopefully this will be a little bit more that I can offer that may be an example as well. So this poem is called To Dorothy, and it's by Marvin Bell. You are not beautiful exactly. You are beautiful inexactly. You let a weed grow by the mulberry and a mulberry grow by the house. So close, in the personal quiet of a windy night, it brushes the wall and sweeps away the day till we sleep. A child said it, and it seemed true. Things that are lost are all equal. But it isn't true. If I lost you, the air wouldn't move, nor the tree grow. Someone would pull the weed, my flower. The quiet wouldn't be yours. If I lost you, I'd have to ask the grass to let me sleep. So I just needed to exhale after that. It's such a, I love that poem. And it does actually kind of make me breathe a little easier after I read it. So one of just to let you know, the part that I was speaking about with regard to the prompt that I oftentimes um, will give students in the early part of the semester is just really those first two lines of this poem. You are not beautiful exactly, you are beautiful inexactly. And so I ask students, and I'll ask you tonight as well, that can be a prompt for you too. Think about what comes up for you when I read those two lines. Where have you seen? I mean, I could go through all the senses, but where have you and your senses experienced beauty in an inexact way? What did it look like? What did it taste like? I'm already, my wheels are spinning as to all different examples, but I'm going to restrain myself and not give those examples just yet. I've obviously thought about this a lot because I've used these two lines and this poem in many of my classes. So I just want to sort of give that to you, a little offering as a way to think about beauty and contradiction and the senses as well. So that's the first piece of literature, I guess, or first prompt that we can think about together. If there's anybody that wants to offer in the comments an example of what they think represents beauty in an inexact way, or inexact beautiful uh, inexact beautiful experiences, or slices of life, feel free to type those in. So the next example, actually, I did say that I was going to loop back around to Joe Brainard. I always do. It seems like I always do. This book that I brought up in our first session, um, I bring up in many of my classes. It's the nice thing about it is it's small enough that I can literally keep it in my bag for the entire semester, and I always know that if I pick it up and open to one of the pages, there's always going to be something to talk about or something to share with students. So just as a reminder for people who are watching who weren't watching in the first week, this is a memoir where every single line, every single sentence, every single sentence, and it's kind of broken up in sentences and paragraphs. It's a really fascinating, unusual structure for a memoir. I love it. Every single line begins with the phrase, I remember. And a lot of it is very sensory based. So I'm just looking at these. I remember hula hoops is one. I remember very long pigtails and plaid ribbon bows. There's a lot of, obviously the whole book is I remember. So that's just to come back around and say that I remember is a prompt that, yes, is very memoir-ish and memoir based, but you could also, if you're not interested in writing about your own memories, you could certainly write a list of I remembers through the eyes of a character that you want to develop, right? Through the eyes of, an animal, through the eyes of a creature that doesn't really exist, or at least that we don't think exists. I mean, you could do anything you want, but the point is, our point for this particular topic is to try your best after the two words I remember, to try your best to complete that sentence with something sensory. So, using more sensory based language. So that's the Joe Brainard. Uh, the third book I want to use and share, actually, I have to allow for a little more time for this one. I am going to read from it, but I do want to say I am really excited to share this third book with you today and use it in this session because it is also its birthday. I guess it would be, well, it's basically it's pub day today. So this is a book called Glad to Be Human by Irene O'Garden, who I'm really proud to say is one of my writing mentors. She's a really amazing human as well as an incredible artist. She's just a generous spirit and just a very, very important person in my writing life and as a friend as well. So Glad to Be Human is published today. So today is the day it becomes available to the world. I was really lucky to get a copy of this a little bit early because I had contributed some words about it. And I do also recommend that you check out her website, which is, I think, also this week kind of is all new and revised and shiny and bright. And so please check that out. But I do want to share a couple of excerpts from this book, Glad to Be Human. And again, with you in mind, because this is a book that it's basically a compilation of essays and sort of musings and thoughts, adventures in optimism. So I know that these are times where we sort of have to be moment to moment, and I will be the first one to say that every moment of mine is not optimistic and bright and shiny. But I do think that, that being said, we can derive a sense of oh, I don't know. I think comfort and a little bit of peace from hearing about that and hearing about why that matters and hearing about why optimism and joy and um, resiliency and lots of other things that may not be the first thing that you think of when we think about what we're going through right now, why those things do matter. I actually have been listening to a few really great podcasts, and I do feel as though um, the ones that I've been listening to have offered me a chance to validate some of the worry and some of the anxiety and the pain and the uncertainty, but couple that with really validating um, the importance of laughing or the importance of, you know, um, honoring something beautiful in a time like this. I mean, it's again, this is back to how we started with, which is, contradiction. So anyway, I do want to read, and you know what? I just realized that one of my little bookmarks fell out. So I am going to hopefully, I'm going to start with the first one and hopefully find the other, but I'm going to start with this one. So this is from the essay entitled Glad to Be Human, which is the title of the book. But there are a whole bunch of essays and short and pretty much all short pieces in this book that are really worth reading. So this, and again, I've chosen these little selections based on this idea of sense, finding the story after you think about the sensory experience. So this is from the essay Glad to Be Human. Oh, and by the way, the other reason, I knew there was another reason I wanted to bring that is, like Joe Brainard in the Glad to Be Human essay, Irene O'Garden begins every paragraph with the phrase glad to be human, or glad I'm sorry, not, she starts with glad to be human, and then she continues on, glad to be human or glad to be living, glad. Every paragraph does begin with the word glad, and it's modified slightly, but there is that beautiful sort of repetition and rhythm that develops as well. So this is from Glad to be Human. Glad of the beauty of stones and their wisdoms, grandmothers of matter, glad of all the world. How much wider, fuller, more colorful can it be? That wild harmonic variation, rushes of beauty from all cultures, differing, flood of beauty, glad to be here for this. So um, I think the word cultures jumped out at me. I mean, I love this little excerpt, because I also, because I've been walking a lot, I'm having this, I don't even know if it's a renewed love affair. I think it's probably a first time love affair, because I don't know that I ever really loved stones the way I am loving stones now. But when I go on these walks, by the way, I should say that I try to walk in more, I guess, isolated, not really rural, but woody areas. I try to walk in more wooded areas, to stay away from people, which makes me sad. And that's a whole other story and situation. But so I am actually, walking around more stones than ever before. And so, and I've been looking at them and thinking of this, community live stream that we've been doing, because I'm noticing the texture, I'm noticing the color, I'm noticing a lot about the shape. Um, and that's actually helping me think about language and think about words and stories. And so, that's part of why I chose this. I also love that she calls them grandmothers of matter. Um, and then I love the word cultures in here, because it automatically takes me to thinking about color and taste and diversity, and the fact that there is so much richness in experiencing the different, um, flavors and the sensual, backdrops of, various cultures. And obviously, that's my take on things. But I have done a little bit of that in my life. I hope to do a lot more. And I can tell you that I've always felt that it resulted in my feeling that I stretched my understanding of myself and of the world a little bit more than before. And it did help me in some ways to, to attach meaning to that diversity of experience, and to then want to make meaning on a piece of paper, through a story, or just even through a reflection. Again, it doesn't have to be that I, create a story that gets published. It could just be a reflection or an entry in a diary. So it made me, that this excerpt did make me think about, color and flavor and scent. I love the phrase flood of beauty, glad to be here for this. I think that the other one that I wanted to read, is actually on this page. As I said, my bookmark thing fell off, but, um, I think it was this one. Glad to be human for the feasts of all cuisines, any day, any taste in the world, and invented combinations like discovered common tastes in conversations between strangers, the mixing of cultures, complementing the glorious rush of fruit and vegetables and grain, fresh and fresh, glad. I did mention that she's a poet, but if you haven't, if I didn't, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that when I was introducing her and the book to you. But obviously, she's a poet. She uses words in ways that are so sort of thrilling and amusement park-ish, and I just love it. So again, that was just another thing. So, um, if you'd like to use a prompt, just to repeat myself, the prompt could be, I am glad to be human because, and then just take it away. And actually, I'll just I'll just say it again on Irene O'Garden's new beautiful website. She had asked a bunch of people to respond to that prompt, and there's a section in there. I think it's in the section about the book where people do, and I'm really happy. I mean, I was happy to say I'm happy to say that I contributed a couple of little lines, and it was just a great it was a great thing, to be asked by someone I admire and care about, but also to have to think about that. Not have to, but to be asked to think about, especially as we've said now, when we are all feeling some degree of rubbing and friction and strain in different ways, in various ways, and to be able to sort of sit back and just say, um, "Why am I glad to be human?" Is a really it's kind of a cool way to spend a few minutes. So that's another prompt for you. As usual, I'm running out of time, but I think I'm going to end and then leave the other things, the listening and the music part for next week. Next week is actually our last week. So we'll be finishing up. And again, I know I have mentioned this before, but just for those of you who might be joining us who haven't been on in the last few weeks, this is actually a community live stream. So it's through the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. So a bunch of the instructors and I believe several of the MFA students have come together to volunteer their time to offer writing, instruction, prompts, just different ways of thinking about writing or getting words on the page for people of all writing levels, even if you don't identify as a writer. So this is when I say community live stream, this is kind of what I mean. And everybody's doing different variations. Mine is 5 weeks, so next week will be the last week. And there's a lot of good stuff on that. In that, I don't know what word I would use. Not really portal. If you go, obviously you got here, so you can get to all the other offerings. It's a YouTube page. That's what it is. So there's a lot of cool topics around writing and thinking about stories. So check them all out, please. So I'd like to finish up with another writer who I love. And I was looking over some of the work that she's done. I was looking over some of her articles, and I was actually looking for one of her books and I couldn't find it on my bookshelf. I think that I may have loaned it out. It's a book that I use a lot in my classes, particularly my classes on memoir. It's called The Butterfly Hours, and the writer is Patty Dan. She's another extraordinary artist and writer. And she's a really great person as well. And I can say that I've had the opportunity to meet her in person, and that was an honor for me, and it was a real joy in the moment as well. So I wanted to read, because I was talking about walking, and so I wanted to read an excerpt an excerpt from one of her articles on walking. But I also just want to tell you, The Butterfly Hours, again, is a wonderful book that is, speaking of prompts, is filled with great prompts for getting words on the page. And it's also, what I love about it is it's also just like this small little gem that you can just carry with you and just open it up at any point. You can open it right in the middle, and there'll be something that I guarantee you there will be something that will speak to you. It's not a book that you have to, read from the beginning to the end. It's really a book that just offers great prompts and kind of, I think on some level, the story behind the prompts too, which I love. So this is a quote by Patty Dan about walking. "Even when demons try to steal my soul at night, when I get up and walk in the morning, they are spun out. I try to heed the advice I give my students. Walk and then write. Get up from your desk and walk some more." So I guess one thing to ask you, for those of you who are tuning in, whether it be every week or not, or just for those of you who are either working on your writing practice or your walking practice, or just I mean, just maybe trying to just stay present every day, trying to stay open to discovering new ways of seeing the world around you, and by that I mean it could be your immediate world right in your home, right in your neighborhood. It could be it could be the larger world. Whatever it is, uh, I I would like you to think about walking and and how the experience of walking, if you're open to what's going on around you, to the things that you can smell. I don't know about taste, but actually, I recently said something about being able to taste sunshine. So I would argue that. Um, and all the other senses. So the idea maybe of going for some walks this week and then coming back from those walks and writing something. I think that could be a cool way to um, to enliven your practice, and also to maybe discover something that you didn't know was there, about observing and noticing and paying attention. I realize that it's 6:37. I have time for one show and tell before we end, and then I'll save the rest of the things for next week. So the I know I've been bringing stuff up from upstairs. Some of the stuff has been in my office and sharing it with people. And so I do this, I guess, as a way to give you one more prompt. Don't discredit the amount of physical things around your house that you can experience um, through a sensory experience, and then be able to use as a springboard into a story. So this is actually a handkerchief, as you can see. This is not one of my mother's handkerchiefs, but I will tell you that um, the handkerchief was kind of a dis- it was constant in in the writing that I did that became my book. I didn't even know it at the time. I didn't know how relevant a handkerchief was in my childhood until I actually sat down and started writing about memories. But what's interesting is that there is something, and so this wasn't my mother's. Actually, I did find this handkerchief on a walk that my husband and I were on a walk a couple of weeks ago in our town, and this was just kind of sitting there on the ground. Nobody was around, so I picked it up, I brought it home, and I washed it. And it does remind me of my mom, because it is like a vintage old handkerchief, so it has that old fabric feel to it. So that's my show and tell for tonight. I have a bunch of other stuff, but we're kind of out of time. But I will say that I haven't written anything about this particular handkerchief or about what it feels like yet. I do think that something will come, though, because there was a reason that it was there and that I picked it up and I felt drawn to it. So hopefully something will come. Um, I thank you for joining us tonight. I've got other show and tell things. Um, I think we'll start our next session, which is our last session, with some music that we'll listen to together. And then we will launch into talking about listening and a little more show and tell. And hopefully I'll do like a little recap and then give you some, maybe even give you some links to things that you can work on even after the community live stream is complete. So again, thank you all for showing up. Thank you for your interest. If you, as I've said before, but if you want to be in touch with me, you can always be in touch with me through the Writing Institute website, because I'm on the faculty there. So you can get in touch with me through there. I'm also on Facebook, just under Kathy Curto Writer, and then on Instagram as well, Kathy Curto also. So if you want to reach out to me in that way, that's great. Have a good week. I'm wishing you good health. And again, thank you to all of you really for showing up, and to the people in your life who you love and care for, especially the ones who are working for all of us and are keeping us healthy. Thank you for that too. So enjoy your week, be well, and I will see you next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Take care.